The conference room smelled like fresh coffee and expensive cologne that morning in downtown Chicago. I sat at the far end of the long oak table. Notebook open. Pen uncapped. Ready to log the 9:15 strategy session for the quarterly compliance review. Brianna Caldwell swept in at 9:18. Heels clicking like punctuation marks. Her navy blazer tailored sharp enough to cut paper. She was new blood at Wellington and Pierce LLP, Harvard. Former McKinsey. The kind of resume that made partners nod approvingly during hiring lunches. She scanned the room, eyes skipping over me entirely at first. Then she noticed the lanyard around my neck. The records officer badge clipped to my blouse. A small smile tugged at her lips. We're bringing the file clerk into legal strategy now. What's next? Inviting the mailroom to depositions. The room chuckled short, uneasy laughs that died quickly. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but kept my face neutral. I wrote the time, attendees, and the exact phrase she used. Her mistake wasn't a joke. People underestimate the quiet ones every day. No. Her mistake was assuming I wouldn't notice when she casually mentioned streamlining the whistleblower protocol appendix without proper versioning. I had spent 12 years at Wellington and Pierce maintaining the chain of custody for every sensitive file. Metadata trails, audit logs, compliance certifications, I touched them all. The firm prided itself on litigation readiness, the boring backbone that kept multi-million-dollar cases from imploding. I wasn't flashy. I didn't chase headlines. But every revision, every deletion flag, every access timestamp passed through my oversight at some point. Brianna arrived like a storm in designer shoes. Within her first month, she rerouted most of the records team under digital transformation initiatives she claimed to pioneer. Paper became legacy clutter. Physical archives were flagged for liquidation. She joked in meetings about my role. Does the records lady still use index cards? How delightfully vintage. The laughter always followed, nervous, performative. I stopped speaking up. Instead, I started archiving privately. I mirrored key compliance servers through an old federated logging system from our pre-Brianna era. When she transferred my credentials to her favorite paralegal under the guise of efficiency, I didn't protest. I had already built offline encrypted ledgers with every red line she pushed through shared drives. Time-stamped screenshots. Version histories captured before she could walk them back. She edited from her laptop during late nights after client dinners. I spotted the hotel Wi-Fi pings from a Boston conference, 22 minutes of access that left traces. 2 months later, HR summoned me quietly. They called it a strategic transition to logistics support. Brianna signed the memo herself. I nodded, packed my desk, and moved to a windowless cubicle near the supply closet. No title plate, no budget line. But in my drawer sat notarized printouts on acid-free stock, integrity keys tied to disaster recovery protocols. I waited, not for revenge, but for the inevitable slip. The memo landed on a Friday afternoon, 4:47 p.m. Digital Ops Consolidation. All physical archives to be liquidated by quarter end. Staff cuts followed. Brianna paraded the floor with a young intern, clipboard in hand, pointing at file rooms. Anything pre-TikTok era? Shred it. They laughed. I watched silently as her paralegal nearly tossed pre-litigation hold notices until a paper cut interrupted. Legal holds began slipping. Case communications weren't preserved properly. Quarterly compliance syncs vanished. I raised one final concern about outstanding discovery logs from an old wrongful termination matter. Brianna looked at me like I was a child asking silly questions. Let the attorneys handle law. Lauren, you track the paper clips. That was the last time I spoke in a meeting. Weeks later, the air in the office thickened with whispers about the Ramirez case. A senior analyst with rheumatoid arthritis had been denied accommodations, Terminated after rapid warnings. The firm had settled quietly once. But now 6 co-plaintiffs pushed for class action, discrimination, retaliation, altered performance records. No formal legal hold had been placed. No archive freeze. No chain of custody statements. I flagged it through internal channels with a detailed compliance notice, dated and indexed. Brianna forwarded it with a quip about needing nice cream paper for a resume. The board stayed silent. Partners loved her numbers and energy. I accepted the demotion quietly. In logistics, I smiled at the inventory guy who called me the records lady. I said softly. That night, I opened my personal offline system and reviewed the mirror data. Brianna thought she was rewriting history. But records don't forget. They wait. The first time I noticed the deliberate backdating, it looked almost innocent. A compliance notice dated February with references to March emails. Brianna didn't make typos. She made precise edits that slid just under scrutiny. Legal hold notices supposedly issued on claim day. Yet server logs showed generation days later. Performance reviews that perfectly aligned with terminations but lacked creation metadata. Just scanned signatures stapled to blank shells. I didn't raise alarms anymore. That path led to logistics. Instead, I documented ruthlessly. Each evening, I booted my air-gapped personal machine and mirrored every altered document I'd quietly saved. Encrypted vaults, SHA, 256 checksums, immutable timestamps from a Zurich-based authority, before and after comparisons for every memo, and signed red lines pushed through Slack became PDFs. Hashed. Notarized. Brianna believed deleting from shared drives erased history. She didn't understand servers remember. The 2-hour gap between when the Ramirez lead's performance review should have existed and its sudden, final appearance before audit told a story. She timed changes surgically, pre-review uploads, post-sign-off tweaks, late Friday deletions. The Ramirez case gathered steam, now 8 plaintiffs. Whispers of federal oversight. Discovery requests arrived urgently. Brianna redacted aggressively before full legal review. Court filings contradicted internal logs. Counsel blamed technical issues. I archived everything, not to attack, but to preserve truth. My compliance dashboard access died without warning one Tuesday. A cheerful 403 error. The IT guy mumbled about executive restructuring. He confirmed Brianna signed off. That was the pivot from negligence to cover-up. Soon after, HR reclassified me as Operations Associate Document Logistics, box hauler. No more legal meetings, audits, or calls. The memo came from an HR coordinator who misspelled metadata. I requested a meeting. Brianna sent her assistant, smiling too brightly, handing me a company notepad. No more legal stress. Just clean records and fresh starts. I took it, smiled, went home, and logged into my shadow backup environment established during past security scares. Every clause Brianna removed, every timeline shuffled, every signature swapped, all logged immutably. She gutted legal structure internally, creating clean but false trails. Partners saw rising client wins, not the liability wave. HR pulled me in one last time. You're valued. But this is strategic reorg. You're over-indexed on process sometimes. I met the coordinator's eyes. Appendix 6C still lists me as custodian of record. She blinked. That doesn't matter now. It's just paper. Paper. They always say that until it speaks. I accepted the transfer. In the logistics corner, wedged between water cooler and jammed shredder, I plugged in my encrypted drive. Brianna's structure unfolded in raw detail. Every lie, deletion, edit. She thought she'd buried the records keeper. But I was underground now, watching. The inconsistencies piled. Backdated memos. Stripped metadata. Ghost files under generic names. Slack threads directing cleanups and friendlier uploads before discovery. I captured them all. I didn't interpret intent publicly. I ensured denial was impossible. Ramirez plaintiffs pushed harder. Subpoenas demanded HR files. Termination memos. Email archives. Access logs. Policy histories spanning 5 years. Brianna assured the board everything was handled. She omitted the shredded pre-2020 memos. Last-minute edits before purges. Missing trails. Then the court issued clarification. Submit the full name and position of the record's custodian of record per compliance filings. My name remained legally tied. Unchanged in state filings despite internal demotion. Oxygen left the office when the notice circulated. Junior staff whispered about reassignment. Brianna stared at the page. They tried updating designations. But court deadlines ignored internal reorganizations. From my cubicle, I watched her closed-door calls through frosted glass. Wild gestures. Binder slams. She barked orders to find the original protocol binder. It didn't exist anymore. I still had the backup. The hand-delivered envelope arrived unmarked in my logistics inbox. Inside, a single sheet requesting confirmation of custodian duties and readiness to appear if called. Initials in the footer matched Brianna's. Perfect timing. I folded it into my archive binder, turned off my screen, and walked calmly to the break room for coffee. Let them panic. The courtroom was Federal District Court in Chicago, cold, carpeted in tension. No dramatic creaks. Just held breath. Brianna sat polished in an expensive navy suit, blinking too rapidly. Her lead counsel looked strained. Opposing counsel waited with pens ready. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman, spoke precisely. Counsel? MS. Lauren Whitaker was listed on SEC compliance filings for years as records custodian of record. Is that still accurate? My name rang clear. Brianna froze. Her lawyer mumbled about internal restructuring. The judge cut in. Is it accurate? I stood. Chair scrape echoed. I walked the aisle carrying my folder. Acid-free. Gold-clipped. Labeled neatly. I am Lauren Whitaker, records custodian of record. I have brought notarized logs for Exhibit C. Approach. I handed the file over gloved hands. Inside, notarized policy documents. Full redline trails. Metadata exports. Access logs with hash validation. Sworn chain of custody statement. Prepared months earlier. The judge read briefly, then addressed Brianna's side. These entries contradict several submissions, including material dates and authorship. Silence. Brianna's fingers tightened on her pen. Opposing counsel wrote large letters. Got her. The judge found my documentation credible. Further analysis would proceed under supervision. MS. Whitaker. Thank you. Prepare remaining files for evidentiary submission. No applause. Just precision. Brianna whispered sharply to her lawyer. His face sagged. The temperature shifted. No more polite dismissal. They saw me now, not logistics, but the record. By Thursday, opposing counsel used my submission surgically. The backdated legal hold, server log showed generation 23 hours later than claimed, landed hard. No hold issued. Yet Brianna's printout bore her signature. Strike 1. Shredded memos surfaced. 4 performance reviews with identical formatting. Metadata stripped. Scanned from the same copier. My logs showed earlier unflattering drafts predating complaints. Strike 2. Slack threads captured. Directives to delete notes. Upload friendlier memos. With emojis. Strike 3. The judge ordered a preliminary hearing. I sat beside the court reporter. Binder open, answering flatly and accurately. Brianna's defense shifted to confusion, unaware of changes, misfiling, possible tampering. Her attorney suggested a disgruntled former staffer. I leaned forward, pointed to her username in the approval trail. Date.
Time.
IP. Location, her Boston hotel. Silence fell. MS.
Caldwell.
Do you dispute this entry? No, she said quietly. I do not. The court thanked me for essential documentation. Prepare the remainder of your files.
Truth.
Printed and confirmed. Back at the office. Walls buckled. Insurance flagged coverage issues over undeclared misconduct. Clients requested certification reviews. The board met emergently. I wasn't invited but walked past the glass boardroom the next day. Brianna sat pushed back in her chair, hands gripping arms, watching a partner read my red-covered log. It wasn't revenge. It was accuracy, cold, documented, unavoidable. The call came after 8 p.m. I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, binder open like old yearbooks. Adrenaline faded into quiet wait. Unknown number. DC area code. I answered. MS. Whitaker. Low. Amused male voice. This is Marcus Chin, senior partner at Ellis and Hawthorne in Washington. You just made our week. Ellis and Hawthorne, one of the most respected East Coast firms, cross-referencing timestamps in their sleep. Their logo appeared on opposing filings. He laughed softly. That binder, was it real-time or retrofitted?
Real-time.
Redline snapshots. Encrypted weekly notarized backups. Third-party Zurich timestamps. Impressive. They had you moving boxes? He offered Director of Information Integrity, full autonomy. Team authority. Direct partner line. Double my pay. Relocation assistance. Title. I asked. Director of Information Integrity.
No hesitation.
You don't decide tonight. But I'm emailing the offer. Metadata doesn't lie. Neither do we. I stared at the beige wall I'd faced after every ignored day. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't the punchline. I was the proof. My new office at Ellis and Hawthorne had clean lines, locking glass door. No toner boxes or hissing shredder. Plaque read, Lauren Whitaker, Director of Information Integrity. Staff asked serious questions about retention risks and secure vaults. 3 junior analysts took notes genuinely. They knew I'd seen inside the machine. 3 weeks later, a burner Gmail from a former Wellington paralegal. FYI. Internal investigation into Brianna's conduct. Outside counsel evaluating procedural integrity. 7-figure settlement offers floated to Ramirez plaintiffs. My log sat in sealed court folders as exemplary exhibits. I didn't reply. Last Friday, passing the old building en route to a summit, I glimpsed the boardroom. 5 suits staring at untouched paper stack in the center. Paper speaks loudest when ignored. I kept walking. In my locked drawer rests my old Wellington badge under velvet. Records officer. Below it, a Sharpie label on white tape. Custodian of consequence.
No ceremony.
Just fact. Legacies aren't microphones. They're preserved in dates. Signatures. Trails that endure when lights go out. In 12 years keeping records straight, one truth endures. You don't need to raise your voice when the truth is already printed. But what lingers is the quiet cost of arrogance that dismisses the meticulous, of systems that reward flash over fidelity, of how one person's careful preservation can rewrite power's story. Who really holds the firm's soul, the one who speaks loudest, or the one who never forgets? The transition to Ellis and Hawthorne felt surreal at first. Colleagues didn't smirk at titles. They respected the weight behind integrity. My first team meeting involved discussions on cross-border access logs and metadata nodes. Voices attentive rather than dismissive. The analysts young, sharp, diverse, asked follow-ups that showed they grasped the stakes. One said quietly after a session, "We heard what happened at your old firm. Glad you're here."
No pity.
Just acknowledgement. Brianna's fall played out in ripples I observed from afar. Wellington and Pierce issued cautious statements about enhanced compliance protocols. Partners rotated quietly. Insurance premiums spiked. The Ramirez settlement talks accelerated. Plaintiffs gaining structural reforms alongside damages. I kept one ritual, monthly review of my personal archive drive. Not for gloating, but maintenance. Each entry reminded me why diligence matters in a world rushing toward digital convenience. Backdating a memo might seem minor until it unravels careers and trust. One afternoon, Marcus Chin stopped by my office. The Ramirez lead counsel called. Wanted to thank the custodian personally. Said your logs didn't just win the day, they set precedent on chain of custody standards. I nodded, feeling the weight lift slightly. Yet the story doesn't end in triumph alone. Nights. I sometimes replay the conference room laughs. The casual demotion. The way power dismisses process until it needs it desperately. Brianna wasn't evil incarnate. She was ambitious in a system that rewarded shortcuts and charisma over quiet competence. How many others rise the same way? Leaving invisible damage in audit trails? In my new role, I implemented mandatory dual verification for high-stakes edits and cross-training so no single person controls the record. The juniors embraced it, sensing the human cost. Visiting Chicago recently for a deposition, I avoided the old lobby but caught news. Wellington and Pierce restructured leadership, emphasizing governance. No mention of names, but the message was clear. Back home, the drawer with the old badge stays locked. It's not a trophy, it's a reminder. Records outlast egos.
Truth.
Meticulously kept. Eventually surfaces. The moral echo, in offices where flash overshadows fidelity. The unassuming keeper of history may one day be the one who decides its verdict. Will we value the quiet guardians before crisis forces us to? Or will we keep laughing until the paper speaks? That question lingers. Long after the courtroom cleared and new offices filled. The record remains.